10:47 p.m., October 19, 1939. The North Atlantic is already slipping into its long wartime night, the kind of darkness that swallows sound, distance, and certainty. A westbound convoy designated HX-79 pushes through the cold, uneven sea, its merchant ships stretched across miles of water in a loose, vulnerable formation. They are carrying grain, machinery, fuel, ordinary cargo made suddenly vital by war. For the men aboard, the ocean feels empty, watched only by wind and waves. Somewhere beneath the surface, German listening equipment is recording every vibration of their passing, every careless revolution of a propeller shaft, every echo that betrays direction and speed. The Battle of the Atlantic has barely begun, but already it is clear that this will not be a conventional naval war. There will be no decisive fleet engagements, no single Trafalgar or Jutland to settle the outcome. Instead, this will be a war of endurance, of logistics and mathematics, of tonnage sunk versus tonnage built. Britain, an island dependent on overseas supply, is facing a strategic equation it cannot escape. Germany, unable to challenge the Royal Navy directly, has chosen the depths as its battlefield. The submarine, small, claustrophobic, invisible, will be its primary weapon. In the autumn of 1939, German U-boats are still few in number, far fewer than the Kriegsmarine had hoped to deploy before war came. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz knows this better than anyone. He has studied Britain's shipping lifelines since the First World War, and he understands that success will not come from isolated sinkings but from concentration, coordination, and timing. Until more submarines can be built, each one must operate with precision. Each patrol must count. Among the men Dönitz trusts most is a young commander named Otto Kretschmer. At 31, Kretschmer is already earning a reputation for discipline, restraint, and lethal efficiency. He believes in closing to point-blank range before firing, in attacking from unexpected angles, and above all in remaining unseen. His boat, U-99, is a Type WWII submarine, compact, seaworthy, designed for the long patrols of the Atlantic rather than coastal ambush. Inside, space is so limited that torpedoes share bunks with sailors. Condensation drips from steel bulkheads. Diesel fumes cling to clothing and skin, yet morale is high. The men know they are pioneers in a new kind of naval warfare. Convoy HX-79 has no idea it is being stalked. At this early stage of the war, Allied convoy doctrine is still evolving. Escorts are few, often outdated destroyers or hastily armed trawlers. Radar is primitive, sonar unreliable, and air cover non-existent once the convoy moves beyond the reach of land-based aircraft. At night, ships sail blacked out, trusting darkness to hide them. It is a reasonable assumption until darkness becomes a weapon turned against them. U-99 has already made contact earlier in the evening. Kretschmer has followed submerged, listening, calculating, resisting the temptation to attack too soon. He knows that if he strikes from ahead, the convoy will scatter, escorts will react, and the opportunity for sustained destruction will vanish. Instead, he makes a decision that will define a new phase of the submarine war. He allows the convoy to pass over him. From the bridge of a merchant ship, nothing appears amiss. The sea rolls on indifferent, but below the surface, U-99 slips deeper, reducing speed, letting the thunder of propellers fade overhead. Then, once the convoy has moved on, Kretschmer orders his boat to surface, silently, carefully, into the blackness behind them. The submarine that seemed to vanish has not retreated. It has repositioned itself into the convoy's blind spot. This tactic is as simple as it is devastating. At night, a surfaced U-boat is faster than most merchant ships and often faster than escorts. Its low profile makes it nearly invisible against the horizon. Lookouts scanning ahead for danger rarely expect a threat from astern. Kretschmer brings U-99 up to speed, closing the distance, weaving between columns of ships like a predator moving through tall grass. At 11:04 p.m. the first torpedoes strike. A freighter erupts in flame, its cargo igniting in a sudden, terrifying bloom of light. Within minutes, another ship is hit, then another. Confusion spreads across the convoy. Some captains order emergency turns, others maintain course, unsure whether stopping will make them safer or more vulnerable. Distress rockets arc into the sky, briefly illuminating the scene and revealing targets to the attacker. From U-99's bridge, Kretschmer watches the chaos unfold through binoculars. He does not linger. Each attack is calculated, each torpedo assigned to a ship whose size and position promise maximum effect. He is not alone. Other U-boats, drawn by radio reports, are converging on HX-79. What follows will become one of the most destructive convoy battles of the early war. By dawn, 12 ships have been sunk. Hundreds of sailors are dead or struggling in lifeboats amid oil-slicked water. The escorts, overwhelmed and outpaced, have been unable to prevent the slaughter. For the German command, the engagement is a validation of doctrine. For Britain, it is a warning that the Atlantic is far more dangerous than anticipated. Yet this is not merely a story of tactics and tonnage. It is a story of perception and misperception, of how invisibility shapes fear. To the men of HX-79, the submarine seemed to disappear, then reappear impossibly behind them, striking where no one expected. The ocean itself appeared complicit, hiding the attacker, revealing the victims. As reports of the attack reach London, the Admiralty begins to understand that traditional defensive measures are insufficient. Convoys will need more escorts, better coordination, new technology. The war at sea will demand industrial mobilization on a scale not yet imagined. Shipyards will have to outbuild sinkings, scientists will have to outthink silence and depth, and sailors on both sides will have to endure months at sea in conditions that test the limits of human endurance. For Kretschmer and his crew, the patrol continues. Supplies are limited, torpedoes dwindling, fatigue setting in. Each successful attack increases the risk of detection. Allied commanders are learning, adapting, closing the gap between vulnerability and defense. The Atlantic is becoming a chessboard where every move is studied, countered, refined. The disappearance and reappearance of a single submarine behind a convoy is not an isolated incident. It is a glimpse into the evolving logic of the Battle of the Atlantic, a conflict where position matters more than firepower, where patience can be deadlier than aggression, and where the line between hunter and hunted shifts with every passing hour, every change in weather, every flicker on a sonar screen. And as winter approaches, bringing longer nights and harsher seas, both sides are preparing for a struggle that will decide far more than control of shipping lanes. It will determine whether nations can survive the war at all. And as the shockwaves from HX-79 spread through naval headquarters on both sides of the conflict, the Atlantic begins to reveal its true nature, not as a vast empty space, but as a tightly constrained artery through which the life of empires must flow. Britain's vulnerability is no secret. Long before the first torpedo struck, planners in Berlin and London alike understood the arithmetic of blockade. Britain imports more than half of its food, nearly all of its oil, and critical raw materials without which factories fall silent and armies stall. If those sea lanes are severed, the war could be decided without a single soldier setting foot on British soil. Germany's leadership is divided on how to achieve this. The surface fleet, battleships and cruisers, offers prestige and symbolic power, but their vulnerability to air attack and superior British numbers makes them a risky investment. The submarine, by contrast, is cheap, elusive and psychologically corrosive. Each sinking carries an impact far beyond the tonnage lost. Insurance rates rise, crews grow scarce, confidence erodes. Dönitz understands that the submarine war is as much about pressure as destruction, and pressure depends on unpredictability. The tactic demonstrated at HX-79, allowing a convoy to pass, then surfacing behind it, quickly becomes a cornerstone of U-boat operations. It exploits the fundamental limitations of early Allied detection systems. ASDIC, the Royal Navy's primary sonar technology, is effective only at short ranges and loses contact at high speeds or when a submarine passes directly beneath a ship. At night, with escorts focused ahead and outward, the rear of a conv becomes a blind zone. German commanders refer to it informally as the shadow, a place where a submarine can exist without being seen. But this method is not without risk. Surfacing at night in the open Atlantic exposes a U-boat to collision, gunfire, or sudden illumination by searchlights. It demands exceptional seamanship and discipline. Kretschmer enforces strict silence on the bridge. Orders are passed in whispers. Cigarettes are forbidden. Any spark of light could give away their position. The men know that if they are detected inside a convoy, escape will be nearly impossible. As autumn turns to winter, U-99 and boats like it continue to refine their approach. Attacks are coordinated by radio, with U-boats reporting convoy sightings to headquarters and to each other. This early form of wolfpack tactic is still crude, limited by the need to transmit on frequencies that Allied intelligence is beginning to monitor. Yet even imperfect coordination multiplies effectiveness. One submarine forces escorts to react, another slips through the gaps created by that reaction. The human cost of this learning curve is immense. Merchant sailors are often civilians or reservists with minimal training, thrown into a war zone with little more than a life jacket and a vague understanding of what lurks beneath them. When a ship is hit, survival depends on speed, luck, and weather. Cold Atlantic water can kill within minutes. Lifeboats drift for days before rescue, if rescue comes at all. These realities are recorded not in dramatic speeches, but in shipping logs, casualty lists, and the quiet correspondence sent to families weeks or months later. On the German side, life aboard a U-boat is an exercise in endurance. Patrols can last 6 to 8 weeks. Fresh water is rationed, washing becomes impossible, food spoils, bread grows moldy, then rock hard. Air becomes thick with carbon dioxide, diesel fumes, and the smell of unwashed bodies. Yet the crews adapt. They celebrate successful attacks not with cheers but with small rituals, an extra ration, a few moments on the surface breathing cold night air. They are acutely aware that survival depends on remaining unseen. By early 1940, the British Admiralty is scrambling to respond. Escort numbers are increased where possible, but destroyers are desperately needed elsewhere. New corvettes, small ships designed specifically for convoy escort, are ordered into production, though it will take time for them to enter service. Air patrols are extended, but aircraft lack the range to cover the mid-Atlantic gap. For now, convoys remain most vulnerable precisely where Kretschmer prefers to strike. Intelligence begins to play a growing role. British codebreakers working in secrecy are intercepting German naval signals. While full decryption remains elusive, patterns emerge. Analysts start to anticipate where U-boats might be operating. Yet intelligence alone cannot stop an attack that exploits darkness, weather, and the limitations of human perception. In February 1940, Kretschmer claims another series of successes. His reputation grows, both within the Kriegsmarine and among Allied commanders who study his methods with growing concern. He is no reckless hunter. He avoids unnecessary risks, withdraws when conditions are unfavorable, and prioritizes survival over spectacle. This restraint allows him to accumulate victories that shape Allied planning at the highest levels. The idea of the disappearing submarine, of an enemy that can pass beneath you, reposition, and strike from behind, begins to haunt convoy commanders. Training manuals are revised. Lookouts are instructed to scan astern as well as ahead. Escorts are told to zigzag to maintain speed, to assume that any moment of calm may be deceptive. Yet implementing these lessons consistently across thousands of ships and tens of thousands of sailors proves difficult. As Europe falls into German hands in the spring of 1940, the strategic picture darkens further. The occupation of Norway and France provides U-boats with new bases closer to the Atlantic approaches. From ports like Lorient and Brest, submarines can reach convoy lanes faster and patrol longer. The ocean effectively shrinks, tightening the noose around Britain's supply lines. What was once a distant threat now operates from the doorstep of the Atlantic. The disappearance and reappearance tactic becomes even more potent in this new context. With shorter transit times, U-boats can linger near convoy routes, waiting for optimal conditions. Weather becomes an ally. Heavy seas and poor visibility hinder escorts more than attackers. A submarine surfacing in rain and darkness blends almost perfectly with the horizon, its silhouette lost amid waves and cloud. For the men aboard Allied ships, the war becomes a constant exercise in tension. Nights are sleepless, every shadow is suspect, every unexplained noise triggers alarms, yet routine must continue. Cargo must be moved, engines must be maintained. The convoy presses on mile after mile through waters that now feel crowded with unseen adversaries. And beneath those waters, listening through hydrophones, German crews track the rhythm of the conv, counting screws, estimating speed, waiting for the precise moment when disappearance becomes opportunity once more, and the space behind the conv opens like a door waiting to be quietly, fatally crossed. Quietly, fatally crossed, and as 1940 gives way to 1941, the Battle of the Atlantic enters a phase defined not by surprise alone, but by adaptation on both sides. What began as a contest between a handful of submarines and thinly defended convoys is hardening into a systemic struggle, one that stretches from factory floors to research laboratories, from cabinet rooms to the freezing decks of escort vessels. The tactic of vanishing beneath a convoy and reappearing behind it is no longer novel. It is now an expected threat, and expectation itself becomes a weapon. For Allied commanders, the problem is no longer simply detection but coordination. A convoy may have several escorts, but unless they operate as a cohesive unit, a single U-boat can still slip through. Communications at sea remain unreliable. Radio transmissions risk interception. Visual signals fail in darkness or heavy weather. When a submarine attacks from behind, escorts must decide instantly whether to pursue the attacker, protect the remaining ships, or attempt to do both, a dilemma that Kretschmer and his contemporaries exploit repeatedly. Technology advances unevenly. ASDIC improves, but its effective range is still limited, and it remains useless against a surface submarine at night. Radar is beginning to appear on some escort vessels, but early sets are bulky, unreliable, and often reserved for larger ships. Many convoys continue to sail with no radar coverage at all. Air patrols increase along coastal routes, forcing U-boats to submerge during daylight hours, but once night falls, the balance often shifts back in favor of the attacker. The industrial dimension of the battle grows increasingly decisive. British shipyards accelerate production of merchant vessels, but losses remain high. Each sinking represents not just lost cargo, but weeks or months of labor, steel, and fuel. In response, the government expands the convoy system, insisting that even slow, small ships sail in groups despite the delays this causes. It is a strategic gamble. Concentration increases efficiency of defense, but also creates richer targets for attackers who know how to exploit formation weaknesses. German industry, meanwhile, struggles to keep pace with Dönitz's ambitions. Submarine construction is prioritized, but competing demands from the army, from the Luftwaffe, from political prestige projects limit output. Crews require training, and experienced commanders are irreplaceable. Each loss at sea is felt acutely. The disappearing submarine tactic relies on skill as much as hardware. It cannot be mass-produced overnight. Within this environment, Otto Kretschmer's patrols take on an almost instructional quality. Allied analysts study his attack patterns in after-action reports, noting his preference for night surface attacks, his restraint in torpedo expenditure, and his consistent focus on the rear of convoys. They begin to see the outlines of a doctrine: patience, stealth, and exploitation of human expectation. The convoy looks forward, so the attack comes from behind. For the crews on merchant ships, these tactical debates are distant abstractions. What they experience is the sudden violence of impact, the shudder of hull plates, the roar of escaping steam, the smell of burning oil. Survivors describe the uncanny quiet that often follows an explosion at sea, the sense that the ocean absorbs sound as efficiently as it absorbs bodies. Rescue, when it comes, may arrive hours later. Sometimes it does not arrive at all. The psychological toll is cumulative. Sailors develop routines to manage fear, rigid adherence to watch schedules, meticulous maintenance of equipment, superstitions passed from ship to ship. Yet the knowledge that the enemy can disappear beneath you and return from an unseen direction undermines even the most disciplined mind. Sleep becomes fragmented, trust in the environment erodes. The sea, once a neutral space, becomes an active participant in the threat. By mid-1941, the United States, though not yet formally at war, is increasingly drawn into the Atlantic struggle. American destroyers escort convoys partway across the ocean. Lend-Lease shipments begin to flow to Britain, increasing the volume of traffic and the stakes of its protection. German U-boat commanders are instructed to avoid incidents that might provoke American entry, but the line between caution and opportunity is thin. Submarines continue to observe, report, and occasionally test the boundaries of engagement. The tactic of reappearing behind the convoy proves adaptable even under these constraints. A U-boat may trail a convoy at a distance, submerged by day, surfaced by night, maintaining contact without attacking until conditions are optimal. This shadowing role is less glamorous than immediate attack, but it is strategically valuable. It draws additional submarines into position, increasing the likelihood of a successful mass assault once authorization is given. Allied responses become more sophisticated. Convoy formations are tightened. Escort commanders experiment with barrier patrols and coordinated sweeps. Training emphasizes anticipation rather than reaction, yet every improvement introduces new vulnerabilities. Tighter formations mean that a single torpedo can damage multiple ships. More aggressive escort maneuvers can leave gaps elsewhere. The contest becomes a dynamic equilibrium, each side adjusting to the other in real time. In March 1941, Kretschmer's career reaches its apex and its end. During an attack on convoy HX-112, his submarine is detected and hunted by British destroyers equipped with improved sonar and radar coordination. After a prolonged pursuit, U-99 is forced to surface and is disabled by gunfire. Kretschmer orders his crew to abandon ship. The submarine sinks, taking its commander into captivity. For the Allies, it is a symbolic victory. One of the most effective U-boat commanders has been removed from the war. Yet the method he refined does not disappear with him. Other commanders trained in similar doctrines continue to employ the same principles. The idea that a submarine can vanish, reposition, and strike from behind has become embedded in German naval thinking. It no longer belongs to one man or one boat. It is a systemic threat. Kretschmer's capture also provides intelligence value. His professionalism and adherence to regulations mean that while he reveals little under interrogation, his existence confirms Allied assessments of U-boat culture and command philosophy. The enemy is not reckless, he is methodical. Defeating him will require not just courage, but organization, technology, and time. As 1941 draws toward its close, the Atlantic remains a contested space. Losses are heavy on both sides, the outcome is still uncertain, but the disappearance and reappearance of submarines behind convoys has already reshaped naval warfare, forcing a re-evaluation of how ships move, how oceans are monitored, and how invisibility can be turned into a strategic weapon, one that operates not through spectacle, but through the quiet, relentless pressure of unseen presence. Relentless pressure of unseen presence, and as 1942 begins, the Battle of the Atlantic escalates into a true industrial and strategic confrontation. Convoys grow larger, carrying more men, munitions, and materials, while U-boats become increasingly coordinated, working in wolf packs that attempt to overwhelm defenses through concentrated, simultaneous attacks. The principle that once proved so devastating, the ability of a submarine to vanish beneath a convoy and reappear behind it, now integrates into broader operational doctrine. It is no longer a singular tactic, but a component of a complex strategy designed to maximize disruption and cumulative attrition. The scale of engagement introduces new challenges. Radio communications, critical for coordination among multiple U-boats, also create opportunities for Allied interception. Cryptography becomes a decisive front. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park, working in secret, begin to uncover patterns in German naval transmissions. The intelligence gleaned from these operations does not always prevent sinkings, but it allows convoy planners to reroute traffic and anticipate likely ambush points. In this technological cat-and-mouse game, the invisible threat of the submarine is countered by the equally invisible work of analysts and mathematicians thousands of miles away. Weather, geography, and the vastness of the Atlantic continue to favor the submarine in many cases. Storms, fog, and darkness conceal movement, mask periscope wake, and hinder detection equipment. Crews aboard Allied vessels must contend not only with enemy action but with nature itself. Freezing spray, icy decks, and relentless waves challenge endurance and morale. Still, the psychological tension remains constant. The awareness that a killer could appear from behind at any moment, the sense that the ocean itself is not neutral but complicit in the threat. Operationally, German U-boat commanders refine timing and spacing. Attacks are often staged so that convoys are followed and assessed before engagement. The rearward strike principle, once illustrated in Kretschmer's early patrols, now becomes standard. Submarines position themselves where escort attention is weakest, calculate the optimal moment for firing, and then retreat before counterattack can take shape. It is a dance of patience, precision, and calculated risk. The human dimension of the conflict intensifies. Merchant crews learn to cope with the constant threat, developing drills for abandoning ship and manning lifeboats, but each encounter leaves scars. Sailors recount the eerie silence after a torpedo strike, when flames illuminate the night sky and waves carry both debris and the sounds of struggling men. Survivors carry trauma that endures far beyond the immediate danger. On the German side, submarine crews endure cramped, claustrophobic conditions that amplify stress. Patrols are long, exhausting, and relentless. The weight of responsibility for each decision is immense. Industrial capacity shapes outcomes more than individual heroism. British shipyards work at a feverish pace, building corvettes and destroyers to replace losses. Convoys become better protected, but the scale of shipping, over 3,000 vessels crossing the Atlantic in a single year, creates persistent vulnerability. Each submarine loss is quickly replaced in the ranks by a trained successor. Each victory, though significant, is only one thread in a vast, ongoing contest for control of supply lines. Economics underlie every engagement. The tonnage lost affects war production, fuel availability, and civilian sustenance. A single successful U-boat patrol can disrupt thousands of tons of critical cargo, forcing rationing, delaying campaigns, and imposing political pressures in London. Germany relies on efficiency rather than volume. One well-placed submarine can create strategic consequences disproportionate to its size. Conversely, Britain invests heavily in redundancy, ensuring that the cumulative effect of losses does not collapse the national effort. The disappearance behind the convoy tactic evolves into a psychological tool as much as a physical one. Allied escorts now know that danger may come from the unseen rear, and this awareness affects behavior. Ships maneuver cautiously, often slowing progress. Convoy commanders must weigh speed against formation integrity, alertness against crew exhaustion. The ever-present threat shapes every decision, demonstrating the way that tactical innovation reverberates through operational planning, strategy, and even national policy. By mid-1942, the pattern of attrition is clear. Convoys continue to suffer losses, but the combined effects of improved escort tactics, technological advances, and intelligence begin to tip the balance. Long-range aircraft patrols close gaps in coverage. Escort groups coordinate more effectively. Sonar and radar equipment improve. The very tactic that once seemed unstoppable, surfacing behind the convoy to strike unseen, is increasingly countered by layered defenses, though never entirely neutralized. The narrative of the disappearing and reappearing submarine becomes emblematic of the broader Atlantic conflict. It illustrates the interplay between innovation and adaptation, between human ingenuity and systemic response. Every torpedo fired, every ship sunk, every narrow escape adds to a cumulative understanding on both sides of what is possible, what is dangerous, and what must be done to survive. The sea itself remains an active participant in this evolving struggle, a space where distance, darkness, and depth are both weapon and shield. In this period, the strategic significance of the Atlantic cannot be overstated. It is the lifeline of Britain, the conduit for material, the theatre in which industrial and human capacity meet tactical genius. The disappearing submarine demonstrates that small, calculated innovations can produce outsized consequences, reshaping naval warfare in real time and forcing continuous adaptation. For historians, the lesson is clear. In the vast, unpredictable theatre of the ocean, the battle is not only fought with steel and explosives, but with timing, perception, and the audacity to exploit the unseen. And the audacity to exploit the unseen continues to shape events as 1942 deepens into a year of unparalleled tension in the Atlantic. The German U-boat fleet expands steadily, though never without constraint. Shipyards strain under the demand, and the training pipeline for new commanders cannot keep pace with losses or operational needs. Yet the doctrine is well established. Patience, concealment, and exploitation of blind spots, particularly behind convoys, remain central. Each U-boat patrol is now a carefully calculated maneuver, a mixture of strategy, timing, and the raw skill of the crew navigating the unpredictable sea. Allied adaptation continues, but it is a process of learning under fire. Convoy formations are refined, spacing tightened, and zigzag patterns employed to complicate torpedo solutions. Escort groups are standardized, often comprising a mix of corvettes, destroyers, and support vessels working in concert. Communication protocols improve, yet the ocean remains an ally to the attacker. Night, fog, and storm still conceal U-boat movements, allowing a skilled commander to disappear and reappear with deadly effect. Supply lines stretch thin. Britain's imports remain the lifeblood of its survival, yet each shipment risks destruction. Every ton of oil, munitions, or food lost forces industrial reprioritization and political calculation. The pressure is felt not only at sea but in factories, ports, and households. In Germany, successes bolster morale and justify continued investment in U-boat production, but the balance is delicate. A single miscalculation in logistics or crew deployment can render a patrol ineffective. Human experience is central to the unfolding story. Crew members aboard merchant ships cope with a constant, invisible threat. The fear of unseen submarines lurking behind their conv instills both vigilance and dread. Sailors are trained to recognize signs of U-boat presence, subtle changes in water patterns, the wake of a distant periscope, unexplained splashes. Lifeboat drills become routine, yet the reality of survival in freezing waters is brutal. On the U-boat side, crews endure the crushing confines of steel hulls, the relentless cycle of patrol and attack, and the psychological tension of knowing that any error could be fatal. Strategically, the disappearance and reappearance tactic exemplifies the interaction between individual skill and systemic impact. One commander's patience and discipline can inflict losses disproportionate to his vessel's size, while a fleet operating collectively can multiply these effects exponentially. The principle strike from unexpected angles, exploit blind spots, and withdraw before detection resonates through the Kriegsmarine's training manuals and operational planning, influencing every subsequent engagement. Intelligence continues to play a decisive role. Allied codebreakers decode portions of German communication, providing glimpses of U-boat positions and intentions. These breakthroughs allow convoy rerouting, more concentrated escorts, and occasionally preemptive strikes. Yet despite these successes, the inherent stealth of the submarine ensures that surprise remains a constant possibility. Even with advanced warnings, a convoy cannot eliminate risk entirely. The rearward strike tactic continues to exploit the enduring limitations of perception and technology. The Atlantic in this period is not merely a battlefield but a crucible where industrial power, human endurance, technological innovation, and tactical creativity collide. Convoys become laboratories for operational lessons, U-boat commanders test and refine methods under extreme conditions, and each engagement provides data that will influence strategy for months or years. Losses are both tragedy and instruction. Survival offers insight and validates doctrine. By late 1942, the scale of the conflict imposes new dimensions. Long-range aircraft patrols extend into the mid-Atlantic, airships provide reconnaissance, and escort carriers begin to appear, bridging gaps once thought impassable. Submarines continue to operate with remarkable effectiveness, but the tactics of disappearance and re-emergence are increasingly met with countermeasures. Coordinated depth charge patterns, improved sonar, and aerial spotting reduce the window of opportunity for successful rearward strikes. Despite these adaptations, the psychological and operational impact of the disappearing submarine endures. Merchant crews carry the memory of earlier attacks, the sudden inexplicable emergence of the enemy behind them, and that fear shapes decisions in ways measurable and subtle. Convoy speed, maneuvering, and vigilance are all influenced by the possibility that the ocean itself may conceal a predator. Commanders at sea, planners ashore, and analysts in secret intelligence centers all operate with this awareness. Economically and politically, the consequences are tangible. Each loss affects resource allocation, naval priorities, and public perception. The balance of industrial output and shipping capability becomes a strategic contest. Success or failure in the Atlantic directly affects land campaigns, supply of material, and ultimately the ability of nations to sustain the war effort. Within this vast, interconnected system, a single tactical innovation, surfacing behind a convoy to strike, can ripple outward, influencing strategic decisions far removed from the immediate engagement. As 1942 progresses, the war at sea takes on a rhythm dictated by persistence, adaptation, and the interplay between visibility and concealment. The disappearing submarine is no longer an isolated phenomenon. It is a symbol of the evolving art of naval warfare, demonstrating how human ingenuity, environmental conditions, and technological limits combine to shape outcomes in ways both predictable and profoundly unpredictable. In this dynamic, the Atlantic itself becomes a participant, a theater in which distance, darkness, and the unseen are as powerful as any weapon. And the Atlantic itself remains an active participant, a vast, merciless expanse that both conceals and reveals, shaping the fates of those who traverse it. As 1943 unfolds, the scale and intensity of the Battle of the Atlantic escalate further. The Allies have learned much from earlier losses, but so too have the U-boat commanders. Disappearance and reappearance behind convoys remain central tactics, now integrated into coordinated wolfpack operations designed to saturate defenses, overwhelm escorts, and maximize destruction. Yet each success carries new risks, as improved Allied radar, sonar, and aerial reconnaissance make mistakes increasingly costly. By this point, the industrial dimension of the conflict reaches full intensity. British shipyards churn out Liberty ships and corvettes at unprecedented rates, while Germany accelerates submarine production, introducing newer, faster, and more capable models like the Type IX to complement the existing Type WWII fleet. Each addition to either side's arsenal shifts the operational calculus, yet the fundamental lesson remains: stealth and timing often outweigh size and firepower. The disappearing submarine tactic exemplifies this principle. A vessel that can vanish beneath a convoy and re-emerge where it is least expected embodies the asymmetry of the Atlantic struggle. A single ship, carefully positioned, can inflict damage far beyond its own scale. Crew experience becomes a decisive factor. On Allied ships, sailors face the constant tension of anticipating attacks from all directions, maintaining vigilance for days and nights on end, often in freezing, storm-tossed waters. Fatigue is relentless, yet discipline must be absolute, for even a momentary lapse can prove fatal. The knowledge that a submarine can vanish and strike from behind shapes every maneuver, every turn, and every speed adjustment. For the men aboard U-boats, endurance is equally severe. Patrols extend for weeks. Diesel fumes, humidity, and the constant risk of depth-charge attack create conditions that test both physical and mental resilience. Yet the crews adapt, becoming extraordinarily proficient in the precise calculations, silent procedures, and patient timing required for success. Tactically, the lessons of disappearance behind the convoy are applied in increasingly sophisticated ways. Submarines operate in concert, coordinating attacks across multiple vessels, exploiting escort weaknesses, and striking at moments of maximum vulnerability. Night attacks remain particularly effective. A surface submarine, low in the water and moving swiftly, is difficult to detect. Confusion among convoy escorts multiplies effectiveness, while careful withdrawal preserves the submarine for further strikes. The method becomes embedded in operational doctrine, forming a pattern repeated across countless engagements. The human cost is stark. Survivors of attacks recount the surreal sensation of being pursued, of feeling the presence of an unseen predator, of observing ships struck without warning. Lifeboats drift for hours or days in freezing conditions, and the line between life and death is measured in minutes. On U-boats, every decision carries weight. Misjudgment of distance, speed, or timing can result in destruction. Each success reinforces confidence, yet each engagement reminds crews that the ocean is unforgiving, technology is fallible, and human endurance has limits. Strategically, the disappearance tactic exemplifies the interplay between individual skill and systemic consequence. Kretschmer's early demonstrations had proven its value. Now, across the Atlantic, it is practiced and refined at scale. Convoys adjust their formations, escorts coordinate patrol patterns, and technology evolves to meet the threat. Yet despite these improvements, the principle remains resilient. The unseen enemy behind the convoy continues to disrupt, to threaten, and to influence the operational tempo of the Allied war effort. By mid-1943, the tide begins to shift. Allied technological and operational improvements start to blunt the effectiveness of the tactic. Long-range aircraft, improved radar, and better sonar create zones where U-boats can no longer approach undetected. Convoy escort groups achieve higher levels of coordination, and training incorporates lessons from earlier losses. German commanders respond with adaptation, new patrol routes, revised attack patterns, and innovations in torpedo technology. The cat-and-mouse dynamic intensifies, yet the fundamental principle of exploiting blind spots remains a cornerstone of U-boat operations. The disappearance and reappearance tactic also carries psychological consequences. For Allied crews, the memory of earlier attacks shapes behavior, alertness, and morale. The threat of a submarine lurking behind the convoy is ever present, influencing decision-making in subtle but significant ways. For German crews, the knowledge that careful planning and precision can yield disproportionate results reinforces doctrine, even as technology and tactics evolve. In both cases, the ocean itself, its darkness, waves, and distances, remains an active, unpredictable participant. By late 1943, the accumulated effect of these engagements begins to reshape strategic planning on both sides. Britain invests heavily in intelligence, technology, and production to counter the U-boat threat, while Germany attempts to stretch its forces to maintain pressure. The early successes of disappearing submarines behind convoys have forced adaptation at every level, from individual shipboard tactics to grand strategy. The Atlantic has become a proving ground for naval doctrine, for endurance, and for the limits of human skill under extreme conditions. In the end, the disappearing submarine is more than a tactic. It is a symbol of the Atlantic struggle itself, a contest defined by ingenuity, patience, risk, and consequence. It represents the interplay of human decision, technological capability, and environmental opportunity, a lesson repeated across every engagement and every patrol, shaping the course of the war and leaving a legacy that extends far beyond the immediate destruction of ships and cargo. And the legacy of the disappearing submarine continues to reverberate as 1944 approaches, a year that will see the Battle of the Atlantic reach its decisive phase. By now, the Allies have gained substantial advantage through improved technology, intelligence, and coordination, yet the fundamental principle of exploiting blind spots behind convoys remains relevant. The war at sea has evolved into a complex interplay of prediction, observation, and reaction, where every movement carries weight, and every silence is fraught with possibility. U-boat commanders trained in the tactics pioneered by early leaders like Kretschmer continue to employ stealth and patience. Wolf packs are deployed to intercept convoys in choke points, particularly in the North Atlantic routes between North America and Britain. Weather conditions, which once provided concealment, now offer opportunities for calculated ambushes or evasion. Yet the improved Allied convoy system, reinforced with long-range aircraft, escort carriers, and advanced sonar, increasingly limits the freedom once enjoyed by submarines. Attacks still occur, still generate disruption and fear, but losses among U-boats rise, reflecting the growing effectiveness of Allied countermeasures. The human dimension remains critical. Merchant sailors, aware of the lessons from prior attacks, maintain strict vigilance, perform drills with precision, and navigate with constant awareness of the unseen threats. U-boat crews endure longer, more dangerous patrols, often under extreme stress, yet their discipline and expertise make them formidable adversaries. Both sides are locked in a feedback loop of learning, adaptation, and survival, each engagement informing tactics, doctrine, and strategy. The economic and industrial context shapes the stakes. Britain's ability to sustain the flow of vital supplies directly affects its capacity to wage war on land, conduct strategic bombing campaigns, and prepare for the liberation of Europe. Germany's U-boat fleet, despite tactical brilliance, faces limits imposed by industrial capacity, fuel shortages, and the growing effectiveness of Allied anti-submarine measures. Each success and failure is measured not only in tonnage sunk or saved, but in its impact on broader strategic outcomes. Psychologically, the notion of the disappearing submarine has left an indelible mark. The fear that a predator may exist just beyond perception influences decisions at every level, from ship captains to naval planners, from individual lookouts to high command. It underscores the Atlantic as a space of uncertainty, where the seen and unseen interact to shape behavior, risk, and consequence. For historians, this interplay of perception, environment, and tactical innovation highlights the multidimensional nature of naval warfare, demonstrating that battles are fought not only with weapons, but with strategy, intelligence, and patience. As the war progresses into its final phases, the cumulative lessons of these engagements guide both construction of fleets and the training of crews. Convoys sail with greater confidence, yet always with awareness of what the ocean can conceal. Submarines are forced to innovate, adapt, and occasionally retreat. The principle of vanishing beneath a convoy and re-emerging behind it remains, in essence, a testament to human ingenuity applied in the harshest conditions, an enduring illustration of how subtlety, timing, and perception can yield outsized consequences in warfare. In reflecting on the story of these submarines, one sees a narrative that encompasses technology, strategy, human endurance, and environmental forces. It is a story of how the invisible can dictate outcomes, how patience can be as lethal as firepower, and how the vastness of the ocean itself becomes both adversary and accomplice. The submarine that disappeared and then reappeared behind the convoy is emblematic not only of tactical brilliance, but of the broader currents that shaped the Battle of the Atlantic, innovation met by adaptation, stealth countered by vigilance, and the relentless human struggle to prevail in a theater defined by both peril and opportunity. In the end, the significance of these operations extends far beyond the individual sinkings. They illustrate the evolving nature of modern naval warfare, the interplay between strategic necessity and tactical execution, and the profound consequences that arise when technology, geography, and human decision converge. The disappearing submarine behind the Convoy is remembered not merely as a maneuver, but as a symbol of the Atlantic struggle itself, a reminder that in war, as in life, the unseen can often determine the outcome, and the patient, disciplined hand can change the course of history. And as the war draws toward its conclusion, the lessons of the disappearing submarine echo throughout naval doctrine, industrial planning, and collective memory. By 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic has been decided not by a single engagement, but by the cumulative weight of innovation, adaptation, and relentless endurance on both sides. The Allies' expanded escort fleets, long-range aircraft, improved sonar, radar, and intelligence networks have reduced the effectiveness of the once devastating rearward strikes, but the tactical principles pioneered by commanders like Kretschmer endure in training manuals and strategic thought. The concept of exploiting blind spots, patience in positioning, and calculated unseen maneuvering becomes part of the enduring vocabulary of submarine warfare, influencing post-war navies and doctrines across the globe. The human dimension remains at the center of this history. Thousands of sailors, merchant and naval, faced relentless danger, often unseen and unpredictable. Their courage, discipline, and resilience under unimaginable conditions ensured the survival of convoys, the movement of vital supplies, and ultimately the survival of nations. On the German side, the crews who executed the disappearing and reappearing tactics operated under crushing stress, in close quarters, aware that success and survival were inseparable yet fragile. The balance of risk, timing, and precision under pressure became a hallmark of their operational ethos. Strategically, the episode demonstrates the interconnection of tactical innovation and broader war outcomes. One method, surfacing behind a convoy after vanishing from detection, had consequences that rippled across command centers, shipyards, and political leadership. It forced adaptations in strategy, accelerated technological development, and shaped the training of tens of thousands of sailors. Its significance lies not merely in the destruction it caused, but in how it transformed approaches to naval warfare, turning the Atlantic into a theater defined as much by perception and anticipation as by firepower. Economically and politically, the struggle over the Atlantic underscored the vital importance of logistics in total war. Britain's ability to survive depended on the continuous flow of food, fuel, and materiel. Germany's ability to threaten these lifelines relied on exploiting every tactical advantage at its disposal. The disappearing submarine tactic exemplified that asymmetry, showing that knowledge, patience, and timing could amplify the effects of even a single vessel against a global supply network. In a broader historical sense, the story of these submarines reflects the evolving nature of modern warfare, where technology, human skill, and the environment intertwine. It demonstrates that the battlefield is rarely flat or predictable, that unseen forces, whether in the form of a submarine beneath the waves or intelligence gathered far from the front lines, can decisively shape outcomes. It reminds us that innovation, even on a small scale, can reverberate through entire campaigns, influencing the course of history in ways that are sometimes invisible at first glance but undeniable in retrospect. The submarine that disappeared and then reappeared behind the convoy stands as a symbol of this complex interplay. It represents the lethal efficacy of patience and precision, the consequences of strategic insight applied at the tactical level, and the profound impact of human courage under conditions of extreme danger. More than a maneuver, it is an emblem of the Atlantic struggle itself, a conflict of endurance, ingenuity, and adaptation, where success depended on seeing what others could not, moving where others did not expect, and understanding that in war, as in the ocean, the unseen often determines the outcome. Ultimately, the lessons of the disappearing submarine endure beyond World War II. They inform naval doctrine, inspire generations of sailors, and remind us that in history, as in life, subtlety and timing can wield power equal to force. Patience can be more decisive than aggression, and awareness of the unseen can shape the destiny of nations. The Atlantic, with all its peril and mystery, remains a testament to these truths, its waves carrying the memory of the submarines, the convoys, and the men whose decisions, courage, and ingenuity define the course of history.